Hi, it's Donna with the Quilted Angel. I'd just like to show you in this video how to insert vertical sashing or borders without having to unload your quilt and flip it. And what I have on the screen is a simulation of what the quilt would look like, and then Quilters Creative Touch on the right side of the screen. So look to the left at first, and let's imagine that following the videos in part 1 and part 2 of borders and corners, you have done your top border on your quilt and your bottom border on your quilt. And this whole area would represent your quilt itself. So what you want to do now is start your vertical borders this way. What I do is I measure the border part, which would be this design right here. I measure that on one of the top or bottom borders that has already stitched out, and mine came out to around 9 inches. Okay, and then you want to measure the distance from your last point here up on the right and your last point here on the bottom, which is where you're trying to connect your border in between the top and the bottom here. Then you want to divide that number by 9. It's rare that it comes out perfect, so you may have to stretch this a little bit when you lay it out to make it fit in a number that's pleasable here. So let's say when I divide that out, I get something like 9.2. I would stretch this a little bit to be 9.2 inches, which is probably maybe like 9 1/4. Okay, so then what you want to do is, again, pretending this is your quilt, get a piece of paper and look at this diagram here. Let me enlarge that. And what I've done is just a quick draw of what my pattern is. So first I draw a square, and then I just kind of doodle in here to know where my pattern is. You don't have to draw it exact, but make sure you note the beginning and the ending points. Then label each corner. This would be the top left, top right, bottom left. Okay? Because when you get into Quilters Creative Touch and you want to put this design over here, you're going to have to rotate it, and you want it to stitch out correctly. So if I want to stitch my first section here on my particular machine, I can stitch up to 13 inches without having to roll. So what I would do is I would rotate this design and place it right here before I stitch it out. And the way to rotate it is to keep in mind top left, top right, bottom left. And I'll show you that now in Quilters Creative Touch. So you can just select and sew or pantograph, either one. Go ahead and get your border. I'm using the Arcs border. And this screen will automatically come up, and it's ready to place this on your quilt. Place the design on your quilt. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to Settings and change it to 4 points, Stretch, and OK. Okay, now back to my quilt. This is my quilt over here, and remember, I want to turn it. So this area represents this design and these placement options at the bottom, this being the top left, top right, bottom left. So what I would do is take this sheet of paper and over to my my quilt top, and I will lay it down on my quilt top. Okay, and so, and then I will also measure. I would measure from here down to about 9 1/4, and I would put a mark there so that I know I want this to be the right length when it stitches out. Okay, so with your piece of paper turned like that and you're back on your quilt, put your machine at the beginning point of where you want it to stitch. I'm going to say that's about right here. and I want that to be this area, so that's my bottom left. So I will come down here to the placement methods and press bottom left. Okay, and then I want my top left to appear over here on the right edge of my quilt, so I'm going to mark that with my machine, and I'm just be moving my machine to that point, and I would click top left, and then I'm going to come down to my 9 1/4 inch mark, and I want that to be the top right, and then finally the last stitch I'm going to come down to the 9 1/4 mark and put my, oops, I did the wrong one, bottom right. So easy to do. Okay, so I'm going to go back up here. This is the bottom left. And you see how it turned the design? So now this is on the outside. It's going to start here and stitch to here, which when that is stitched will give me this look. This look right here, or similar. Mine are not to scale, so please pardon that. Okay, so now you've stitched that. You will of course pull bobbin, hold your top string. Your machine will automatically take a second stitch, and then move away, grab your bobbin thread and your top thread and click sew, and your design will stitch out. Okay, and now you're ready to do this other side, because again, we're not rolling yet. So at this point, we're going to take the piece of paper and you're going to rotate it the other way. Okay, if I had left it this same way, it would not match up and it would not look the same, because on this border you can see the top is a little bit different than the bottom, and I want it to be consecutive all the way around. So I'm going to take this piece of paper over to my long arm, and I'm going to follow these guidelines to say this would be my top right, this is my bottom right, this is my bottom left, and this is my top left. So I did something wrong again. Okay, here let's try it again. This is the top right, the bottom right, there we go. Then this is the bottom left and top left. And you'll notice too, I'm going to replace this to show you this. This is one good thing to remember when you're doing this. I'm going to put it right here just to show you the difference. So at this point, I know I want it to be my top right to go there. So I click top right. Now as I go to add the other points, you're going in a circle. You could either go, you know, I could have done it the other way and gone clockwise, but now, or counterclockwise, but I'm going clockwise. So I did my top right, and then my next point is going to be my bottom right, and then my next is the bottom left, and see how I'm going in a circle here, and then my top left. So I went in a circle. So you do that, and then what you will have is this look. And so now you will have that row done. At this point, you'll want to scroll your quilt or roll your quilt up so that you can do one here and one here. Now since everything is already turned this way, I usually just go ahead and start over here. And so back to your quilt and lay it out exactly how you'd want it, and stitch that out. Okay, and then you would go over to the right side of your quilt and reverse it lay it out over here based on these markings, and then you will wind up, and then when you sew it, you will wind up with this look. Now, let's say you're at the bottom and it's your last one, and this happens to me. I find that this is no longer 9.25, it's maybe 9.5. It's not too much different, okay? But I want my next, or my last portion of this border to start here and end here. So what I'm going to do over in Creative Touch is change my settings to 2 points, stretch, okay. And now what I'm going to do is just put this aside right now, this template. I'm going to take my machine to this right here on this stitch where this last border ended, and I'm going to mark that as my beginning stitch, which is this button here. So tap that. Then I'm going to come down to here and mark that as my ending stitch, which is here. And then when you pull bobbin and sew, your pattern will stitch out, and the two they should match perfectly. So I'm going to enlarge this a little bit so you could see what I'm talking about. Now, if it's going to be a whole lot, it should not be if you measure correctly in the beginning. But you can see how these do not touch. So by doing that start and end point, they would have stretched and fit perfectly. Okay. And that's all there is to it. You just keep rolling and do side to side and roll until they match. The same thing works on sashings or vertical sashings within blocks. You can do the same thing. Just make yourself a diagram on a piece of paper and just hold that however you want it on your quilt and make your markings according to that diagram. I hope this helps. Thanks a lot.